Hi guys.
Hey,
Hello.
hello.
Hello. So we're going to talk a bit about the Mask of the Red Death. So to start, Eric, can you build us a base and tell us what's an allegory?
Sure. Just to give us the background, an allegory is a story, picture, or poem that has a hidden or implicit meaning or lesson that you really have to interpret the lines and read between them to understand it. You have to, it's not something that it's clear in the story or poem or picture, it doesn't matter, but it is actually hidden in the story.
Okay, that's good. Does anyone know any examples of allegories in movies or stories?
Yeah, so actually when we think of a song, the first thing that came to my mind was Golden by Harry Styles. The song, if you listen to it, is actually really happy and like nice and cheerful, but in reality it really has a sadder meaning to it. The song discusses the feeling of being vulnerable and moving on, and it's kind of sad.
That's
That's good.
sad, I would say.
Yeah.
But you talked about allegories in movies. What I recalled was the movie Wall-E, as shown in the picture. And Wall-E symbolizes and teaches people how to protect Earth. And the entire movie just goes around Wall-E and Evie, and they are trying to save and the abandoned Earth. And in the end of the movie, when the humans plant a green stem and water it, it's a great symbol of the commitment of the humans to save the planet and also of Wall-E and Eve. So that's why it is an allegory.
I really liked the Wally movie, but I never thought about it that way. uh, Another example of an allegory could be the myth of Icarus and Daedalus. In that story, they are both imprisoned in a labyrinth, and they both acknowledge that they won't be able to escape by food. Daedalus was very intelligent, so he was able to create gigantic wax wings, and he taught them how to Icarus how to fly. But he told him not to fly too close to the sun, or the wax would melt and he would fall. But since Icarus was too enthusiastic to fly, he ended up not listening to his father, and as a consequence, he flew too close to the sun and he tragically died with his wings melted. In this story, we can see as an allegory that ambition, pride, and not respecting limits will be punished.
That's good. That's good. Focusing a bit more on the story itself, what are some specific allegories in the Mask of the Red Death?
Yeah, so the person who killed everyone in the abbey, the person that was masked, was actually a representation of the Red Death, which was the disease that was going on. And it may have gotten into the abbey by contaminating their food or someone managing to sneak in, water contamination. There are many various ways that the disease could have actually gotten in. And it's a really good allegory to the inside the story because you think that it's actually a person who's masked, but it's not. It's the disease, and it's unstoppable, and you can't just avoid that. So
Yeah, and as you said that you can't avoid death, I think that's one of the main points of the story. One of the main allegories in the story is that death is actually inevitable. There's nothing that you can do about it. And one thing that contributes to the story's plot are the clock's chimes, because every time the clock striked, every hour that passed, people just got shocked and listened to it and realized that one more hour had passed and they were closer to death. So they could be isolated in an spectacular abbey. They could prohibit people to enter or get out of the abbey, but that it's just inevitable. They can do nothing about it, and that's why they get so shocked when they listen to the clock's chimes.
Yeah. Uh, I Another one that could be an allegory for the Mask of the Red Death is the colors of the chambers of the abbey. In the first chamber of of it is a vivid blue, which represents birth. Then the colors will go changing until it's black, that symbolizes death and fear, just as Eric had said. Uh, and it also represented red death with deep and blood red paints. The chambers in the castle had a design in which people in standing in one chamber couldn't see the next one. So when they entered in one, they couldn't see what was ahead of them. And this could be an allegory to the fact that they didn't know what was going to happen to them until it was already too late.
Wow, that's very interesting. I never thought about it.
So the architecture ends up being very important.
Mm, I have a question. Suppose the story have any influence, for example, the bubonic plague, the epidemics, or anything, have an effect on this story that he made?
So actually, there are multiple options for like inspirations in Paul's life, right? So it could have been influenced by outbreaks in diseases that happened through his life, like the yellow fever or cholera. It may also have been influenced by the sorry, by tuberculosis, which was a disease that actually affected his wife, Virginia, and killed her, killed his mother, and killed his brother as well. But it could also have been influenced by the bubonic plague, which can also that can be seen in the story. Maybe could be interpreted by the Black Room. So there could be many inspirations that led to his writing of the story.
Yeah, I personally think that tuberculosis that affected almost all his family was the main point why he made his story, his inspiration, but we can't really know. So that's a mystery.
Another question. Uh, is an a pandemic? What are the dangers of a pandemic disease nowadays?
I mean, if we think about it, a pandemic in a world today would be insane. I can't even imagine. Just kidding. We are actually living a pandemic. So I can speak from experience. So it affects economy worldwide. It affects everyone. Everyone stops doing living their daily routines, and they have to change. They have to stay home because of contamination, and countries have to change their way of working, their way of problem solving, and that improves their problem solving skills. And doctors and scientists also have to work nonstop to find a cure. So it's kind of insane.
Indeed. Does anyone have a different perspective or something else to add?
If I can say something, I actually think that another danger that could, I mean, it is happening, but could happen nowadays is people that don't believe in the dangers of the disease and that kind of ignore it, like the anti-maskers, which just refuse to wear masks because either I can breathe with the mask on, or they just like think it doesn't work, and that could be a problem because people who are more vulnerable to diseases could be affected by them. So that's something that could happen.
And it's something that it's really a danger, and it happens like a lot of times. There are many people that refuse to wear masks, and it's not something that will kill you if you use it. It will just save you and lots of people. We had some technical problems, but that's we are already back, so we can continue.
Okay, so what are some similarities and differences between Edgar Allan Poe's story and nowadays COVID-19 pandemic?
We made a Venn diagram to answer this question, and I'll start with the similarities, which in the diagram it's written both. I think the most obvious one is the isolation, because Prince Prospero and his friends were isolated in their abbey, and today in this pandemic we are also isolated. Um, Another one are the deaths and casualties due to the disease that spread in COVID-19 spread throughout the world, and in the Mask of the Red Death. throughout the country. Another one is that the Red Death was probably a viral infection, so I will count that as a similarity. And of course, they were both catastrophic because in COVID-19 there are millions of deaths, and in the Mask of the Red Death it decimated almost the whole country, and it was just brutal.
I have another similarity actually that I just thought about, which is in both stories and reality. People don't care about the virus. So Prince Prosper was like not really caring about it, that it killed people and stuff. And in COVID, there are many people that don't respect the isolation and the social distancing. So similarity.
I think Prince Prospero was caring about only about his own life, but in certain way he was not caring about others. And today, people who don't wear masks, for example, are also not caring. So it's certainly similar.
Yeah. So now
And-
let's talk about the differences.
Yeah.
So in COVID-19, we have a technological world, which was different from the Mask of the Red Death because there was no technology since it was ancient. And adding to the technological world, we have online school, which we have to do, the kids, and most people have to work from home. So companies, they all told their workers to go home. And both had no cure. So there's no certain cure. I mean, in the Mask of the Red Death, there is no cure. So people die.
So sorry. So one of the similarities that could be found is that if even if you catch the disease, right, in nowadays, right, you don't necessarily die, but in the mass death, you would 100% die, and actually that would happen really fast, taking like half an hour to completely kill the victim. They would like bleed a lot and just die. And COVID like takes 2 weeks to even just start showing symptoms and isn't nearly as deadly. So those are some differences as well.
Now changing the subject, we also now talking more about the pandemic. We always like to feel that there are steps that we can take to keep ourselves safe, so we can protect ourselves. But if you think, do our precautions really keep danger away, or do they just give us an illusion of safety? What do you think, Jogo?
So, okay, so in the massacre of death, while Prince Prosper and his guests, they thought they were safe by staying inside the abbey and isolating themselves, they didn't really know how the disease worked. And in their case, being confined in a space with that amount of people was just an illusion of safety, which didn't work as they all died. However, nowadays, we have information on a lot of topics and measures to protect yourself that have been actually tested to work. So it's obvious that we're not 100% safe, as not everything works 100% of the time, right? For example, fire alarms can malfunction and anything can happen. Like, we're not 100% safe, but there's safety for us is a reality because we have science on our side and we can get safety measures.
I agree with you. Everybody in the same page.
Same page. So now there were many different there was a different vocabulary from the nowadays vocabulary that we're used to. So why don't we discuss some of the words that you thought were complex or just that you learned some new words?
You can start.
You can speak.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so If I can start, I want to start with the word monotonous, which means uninteresting or repetitious. And one example that I can think of would be, to be honest, I thought his speech was quite monotonous.
And
Um,
what does it mean to be something monotonous?
Oh, I said it before. It means something monotonous is like uninteresting, repetitious. If you're speaking in a monotone voice, for example, you only have one tone, so it's very repetitive and not really interesting.
Eric, you want to give another example?
Sure. I think the word piquancy, which is something with sharp taste or spicy. And one possible example of a sentence is, I remember eating a dish of great piquancy at a restaurant in France. So something with a sharp taste or spicy.
Nice.
um,
Jose, why don't you give an example?
I will say about habiliments. Um, I was thinking about like the prince's habiliments were picked very carefully, and habiliments means a clothing of an occasion. So the prince chose his clothing very carefully for the occasion.
I
Joe,
have another
you
one.
want to give another example?
Yeah. Okay, so the word is grotesque, which means something that's not unnatural, bizarre, absurd. So like far from the ordinary while being very bizarre and gross. So the art piece was somewhat grotesque, which means like it was very weird, basically.
And why don't we someone give an example of the main word, right? Masquerade. So
I can say, as the prefix says, a masquerade is a party with masks. And in the book, there is a big masquerade ball. So I think this is the most obvious example that I could give.
yes, absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so I have another question. So what were some parts of the story that helped you build the suspense in it? What gave you like feeling of suspense from the story?
I think that's something that happened in the story that really built suspense was that in the abbey the ball was interrupted by the chimes of the clock. The people stopped dancing and the music was ceased. Everyone paid attention to the clock ticking with an eerie feeling. However, once the clock stopped, they all gave their attention back to the party as if nothing had happened. I think that the clock chimes contributed to the building of suspense because it reminded the people that they have lost an hour of their lives every time it ticked, meaning that they were closer and closer to death.
I also thought about when Prince Prospero, he was in the first chamber, when someone first lets him know that there's another person, an unknown presence in the masquerade ball. He says, "Who dares?" And he demanded, "Who dares insult us with blasphemous mockery? Seize him and then mask him," he says, and that kind of gives a little suspense. Like the person thinks, "Wow, who's the unknown presence?" Right?
Yeah. I think the last example that I could think of that helped to build suspense was when in the seventh chamber, the clock chimed and everyone looked at death at the masked figure. And after the Prince Prospero confronts him, there's not much time after he's killed and he just falls to the ground. So everyone just gasps and is surprised and shocked about his death. And this certainly builds suspense in the story because he instantly dies and everyone, I mean, no one expected that.
So, a question to see if you guys actually listen to me. What happened when the clock struck each hour and why?
I can answer that. So when the clock strikes each hour, um, everyone in the masquerade, including the Prince Prospero, they all stop what they're doing. They stop. Everyone stops dancing and talking, and they just listen because I think it's really loud and it shocks everyone. And even the band stops playing. The people who are playing instruments, they stop, and the clock warns everyone that 1 hour has passed, and they all know the time. So they have lost 1 more hour of their beautiful lives, which is about to end. Spoiler alert. And yeah.
That's totally correct.
Another question is why is no one allowed either into or out of the abbey? Can you answer? No, Job.
I mean, that's really easy, right? Because no one's allowed to get in or out because of the Red Death. There's a plague, right? And it basically devastated like 50% of the country when they started their lockdown. So like Prince Prospero basically wanted to protect himself and his friends, so he brought them and locked them inside so they could remain immune. But so no one was allowed in and out, so the disease couldn't spread. Like someone couldn't go out, get the disease, and then come back in, basically.
Yeah, that's totally it.
Okay, so now can anyone please summarize the end of the story and maybe even express how you feel about it? Like, what did you feel while you read it, and why?
I can say about it. At the end of the story, the death of Prince Prospero and the many guests that were present at the abbey with him, uh, the author conveyed the feeling that there was no escape when the last person died and the clock that had been ignored by everyone before gave its last chime as if like their lives had ended. uh this gave us a really eerie feeling because like it shows us that no one could escape the Red Death and they just ignored it as if nothing had happened, as if they were hopeless against something bigger than themselves.
Yes, it's kind of scary. And
Yeah.
I I like the story overall. I think we are good. So to finalize everything, the discussion, how did you like the project, and what was something that you learned? Why don't we start with Jewel?
Sure. So I think this project was really nice because I've already heard about Edgar Allan Poe, of course, right? And his stories are really well made and very interesting. So it was nice to read the story and then get to like dissect it, you know? Something that I learned, I guess it was very useful to compare the story to something that was happening like literally right now, like COVID, right? So I guess that was something that I could take away. Like this comparison with the immediate now was very interesting and something that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I totally agree with you. I think I really liked the story. I had already read some stories of Edgar Allan Poe, but I think the main point why I like this story is because the plague was that happened in the story is can be easily represented by coronavirus today, and it's really easy to compare them, and it's something that we are living now. So we can identify ourselves inside the story. And I also liked the experience of being moderators inside the discussion because it helps us to build public speaking and communication skills. And it's always good to work in groups. Um, can you can say what you liked about the project?
Sure, I'll say me. I'll do me, then let's talk. Then Jose can speak. So I liked, like everyone said, how we could relate to the story, and we could compare it like we did in the Venn diagram. We can compare it to nowadays and COVID, and I think it was nice. I never read the story before, and I really enjoy the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. I think they're really well written, and so was this one. So, yeah. And what I learned was new vocabulary for sure. My main point. And I liked our discussion. I think it was really organized and everyone participated. And I learned, like Eric said, public speaking skills and being a leader as a mediator. Was that?
I agree with everything that everyone said. I had already done a project about Edgar Allan Poe before, but and I had already seen the Mask of the Red Death, but I hadn't like actually went go into depth about how it correlates with nowadays situation and everything else. I think that this discussion was really nice. I got to learn a lot about it.
I think we all did. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Ms. Andrea, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you.
See you.
Yeah, and that's
Bye.
it. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Adios.